First thing I want to ask you about is your younger days. Obviously, you graduated from Ithaca College. So I want to ask you during that time in your life, what were you doing in the basketball world?
Well, when I was in school, I was just trying to get as much tangibles experience as I could get. But I remember, to cram in a college experience to 3 years, I was taking 21 credits a semester. I was working 2 jobs. I had a radio show on campus. I was not just writing for the campus newspaper, but I was also writing for a local Gannett paper. I was also doing stuff sporadically for the campus television station. So I was able to kind of get everything in during the 3 years I had in college. And basketball was obviously a passion, but the first passion was more so just to see if I could make a career in sports media.
Right. Okay. So I know you mentioned you did some stuff in radio, and obviously you had numerous radio jobs I read about. Just kind of talk about like what's that experience like going into that role, the first radio show you did.
I think just the big thing is, I think you come out of college thinking that you have a lot of answers, and the truth is you have no answers. And I think, you work your whole life at the time to get to the top of something, to get to a situation where you have maybe a radio show on campus or you have a column on campus, and then the whole process starts over again. So I think you're constantly finding ways to motivate yourself along the way, regardless of what point you're at in your life.
Nice. Okay, so obviously now you're with CBS Sports, College Basketball Insider, and I watch you on, Inside College Basketball before and after games. Just kind of talk about that experience, talking hoops with those guys.
Just, everybody likes to talk about, well, I want to do this and I want to have a job and so on and so forth. The people who have jobs are people who are usually unhappy. The people who have careers are the ones that are always happy and never feel like they're going to work. So for me, whether I'm writing a story, whether I'm doing a podcast, whether I'm doing an interview like I am right now with you, or I'm doing television in the studio, for me, the job doesn't really change. You're trying to report on college basketball at the highest level and just obviously make sure that you maximize every opportunity you have in all of those mediums.
Nice. Okay, so obviously, you do your writing too, and you do your speaking. But circling back to like your college days, did you just learn to write from just simply taking like college courses, or did you have like an emphasis, on writing?
Well, before I went to college, I was published in certain newspapers in the Gannett family, and I had the tangible experience. And I was somebody who always just wrote and wrote and wrote and, freelance for a number of newspapers while I was in college and, covered recruiting as well, which kind of obviously dipped my toe into the college basketball water. So I was somebody who knew that I had to obviously be able to write to do anything in this world. And that's always been the way, especially on the basketball beat, that I've obviously wanted to sharpen my knife. But it's interesting, the changes that we've seen from the writing aspect, I'd say the last 2 to 5 years have been significantly different. For so long, it was obviously, if you're an information person, you want to get a place online to write, you'd like to do television and pair it with obviously that as well. But people are consuming information differently now. That's why you see so many people looking at 30 or 50-second clips on social media as a
Right.
better way to obviously maybe, take information and absorb information. So I think one of the keys that I've learned is to constantly be evolving in everything you do.
Yeah, no. And leading into my next question, you talk about that, those 60-second or 2-minute clips, whatever it is, that are easy to consume. So now you do the show Stuffed along with everything else you're doing. I love that show. And I'm just kind of curious, how did that originate? Because, it's just a great, content of stuff to watch.
I appreciate you saying that. Well, Stuffed is obviously and was, created by a company called Malcolm Media, and they have a very successful show in the NBA realm, All the Smoke. And
Right.
during last season, about a month in the last season, I got an email from Pat Capper at Malcolm Media, and he says, like, we want to expand in the college basketball space, and we want to expand around you, and obviously, focus on the points that are passionate to you. And we know you're a big food person in addition to college basketball. So let's pair that together. Let's bring college basketball into a diner-like setting and allow people in the audience to feel like they're just having lunch with you talking college hoops. So I'm really excited for the long-term potential of that show. I think it has great long-term potential to connect with the college basketball fan and give obviously everybody the meat and potatoes that they want with the sport.
Absolutely. Just a brilliant idea. When that first came out, I was like, this is it right here. And I got to tell you, the funniest thing or the most interesting thing I've seen on Stuffed is when you're on with Dickie V and Coach K calls him. What was that experience like?
It was funny because, there's only one person that could ever blow off Coach K, and that was Dick Vitale. And I don't think he processes it as much while you're doing the interview as you do afterwards. When it's like, Coach K has won multiple Olympic gold medals, won 5 national championships, and Dick Vitale was able to kind of hit the ignore button because he wanted to finish the interview and stuff. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool for sure. And then obviously you have the don't at me section. You probably get, everyone saying, John, give us a one-liner, but like you say, you got to let that organically originate. So that's also good stuff. And now obviously I want to ask you about, I'm not going to ask you the traditional questions you get asked about the one-liners,
Yeah.
but I just want you to expand on 2 of them that are my favorite. Essentially, I'm a big Barstool fan. Listen to Pardon My Take. Listen to you on them. Big Cat, America's roommate. I don't think there's a better way to describe that dude.
Yeah, Big Cat's just a guy who really he could have been like the world's college roommate, like their freshman year in the dorm, because he's such a good guy. He's so great at what he does, but he's also somebody who could just, ring your doorbell from downstairs with a dozen donuts and just kind of sit on the couch and watch 3 college football or college basketball games for you. So what you're hearing, what you're seeing, that's pretty much who he is.
Right. Okay. And then the Jake Marsh of future, I had Jake on the podcast the other day and I asked him about how that started. And that's a really cool story. So you just obviously see potential in Jake Marsh.
Yeah, no, I think Jake Marsh is the real deal. And Big Cat and PFT were telling me about him when I was on their show once. And they're like, you got to know who Jake Marsh is. He's involved with Vermont basketball. So when Vermont played St. John's last year, I went to the game and I did a halftime interview with Jake. And I think, Jake has the chops, down the road when we're watching games to be, a very, very good play-by-play guy. We'll be watching his college hoops calls for a long time.
Agreed. But okay, so I just want to first of all thank you for your positivity during this time, tweeting "this too shall pass," that has gotten some of us through this time that needed college basketball. Obviously, you are one of them. And stay positive, test negative has kind of taken on a life of its own. What was the moment that you tweeted that, and how did that kind of come about?
I was talking to a coach and we were just talking about the importance of winning the battle every day between the ears and, the mindset that we all have to get to the other side of this pandemic. And, he just said, yeah, we got to stay positive. And I was like, yeah, we got to stay positive. We also got to test negative. And I was like, wait a minute, I might have something there. And I guess somebody told me a couple of months after, oh, well, somebody in college football, said something like that similarly too. I was like, yeah, but I don't watch football socially.
100%. Okay. So obviously you're a college basketball insider and, that's something, maybe I see in my future if it all works out and I keep working hard. I'm curious, you hear that word insider a lot, right? I'm just curious, what are a couple things, if you don't mind sharing, if not, all good, that kind of make you an insider? It doesn't have to be specific, just general.
Well, first of all, you have a perspective, I think, that comes from a different lens. It's not from a player. It's not from a coach. It's a completely different perspective. You see the sport, from 40,000 feet out. And also, you're obviously in tune on what's going on with certain programs, different trends, different big picture storylines. And, obviously news is a big part of everything. You want to be on top of news as much as you can, but you learn after a while that you're not going to get, every single story. So you just kind of have to accept it and just get what you can, but offer a certain perspective, I think, that's deeper and a little bit broader than most people who cover the sport.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. And the things that come along with that is obviously you can go ahead and go watch a practice. So that's kind of what I'm going to ask you about is, you've seen a lot of Division I high level teams practice. Who are some that come to mind that, that are just really locked in and you were interested in?
Well, I think you enjoy every practice to at least I do from a certain extent because every coach, every program is different. Obviously the physicality level of a West Virginia practice is going to be, really, really different than others. But, sometimes you go to a mid-major practice and you see obviously things that you hadn't seen before. So I'm somebody who's a lifelong learner and is going to continue to try and learn each and every opportunity. So I try and take different things from, different instances where I've been fortunate enough. I remember when I was at a Wisconsin practice, this was the year before Wisconsin went to the title game and lost to Duke. So it was the year after they went to the Final Four, lost to Kentucky. And I remember just sitting with Bo Ryan and he brought out this quote and I wrote it down in my journal and I obviously keep it close. And the saying around here is be really good every day at all the things that don't take talent. And I think that's a tremendous, tremendous line to use moving forward in life, because it's the truth. The best thing, obviously, that we can do every day is prepare to the highest level, be as professional as we can, be to the highest level, and be a really good human being at the highest level. So if you can obviously stick to those things, everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, for sure. Bo Ryan, great coach. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, so I grew up going to the Kohl Center all the time. Okay, so now I listened to you on Adam Finkelstein's podcast, and he kind of mentioned it that like you took on the entrepreneurial route as a insider. So I'm curious, was that just completely how you are as a person, or were you how the lanes that you've been able to go into, just how did you get some of these ideas?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny, like I said, I think in an earlier question that you asked, for a long time, I wanted to obviously be like, everybody else. And, you want to obviously have a national column, you want to do television at the highest level. Podcast kind of came into play about 5
Yeah.
years ago, and so on and so forth. And you start to learn after a while that if you're really going to leave a mark in your industry, you need to transcend the space. So I looked at different ways. How can I transcend things? And you start to see a little bit more and more, and we've seen it the last couple of years. There's not really as much of a focus on writing anymore nationally. Like people are consuming things differently. So it's like, well, how can I do something different? So I'm kind of thinking about it. I had this opportunity to do a show, Stuffed, which was on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was doing that. And I was kind of like, that could be a way to differentiate. And since I started doing that, I've noticed other people have kind of went to YouTube and tried to emulate that. Well, if you're doing that, if you're being a trendsetter, so on and so forth, and you're blazing a trail, you're transcending the space.
Yeah.
I obviously got a call, a couple of years ago from an outside marketing company who told me, look, we think there's a market there for, you to launch a merchandise line. And I said, well, it's important to me if I do that to at least have a portion of the proceeds go to a charity, and obviously show that, while I'm obviously trying to build my own brand, it's still very important to give back to those in need. And, you think about it, nobody else is doing that in the space. So it's a way to transcend. And then, one of the big things that I'm happy I did was, I host the College Hoops Today podcast, which is the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. But I had the URL for that. And I said, you know what, with the way things are going right now, doing a podcast, doing stuff for CBS Sports, doing obviously Stuffed, having merchandise, I needed something to bring it all together in one place so everybody could find it. So I launched collegehoopstoday.com, and it gives me an avenue to write whenever I want to write, and kind of finalize your brand in one specific setting. So I think the biggest thing that, you need to, obviously look at is this, and regardless of what any field that you're in, you have people all the time, I think, trying to follow a certain person's lead and say, I'd like to be the next so-and-so. We should always try and be the first and best version of ourselves, and not really waste as much time trying to emulate somebody else.
Yeah, man, that's good stuff. Appreciate that insight. So one more question about kind of, your path in the media world. So, you're a good writer too. Obviously you have published stuff in the biggest of, where it can go. So I'm curious, is, this, with the way media is going now, are you a fan of, talking more than writing, or is it all just kind of, going together, like you said, on the College Hoops Today?
No, I mean, like I obviously am going to always write, because that's, for me, the best way to prepare. It's obviously, the old school way to report. I mean, I've written for numerous newspapers. I was a national columnist for years at cbssports.com, but the business is obviously steering away from that.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I'm obviously up to date on things with the business. And I don't want to say like that I would never like go back to doing something, that would obviously with a focus on writing. But the way things are right now, people are obviously very consumed with what Generation Z is doing. And I remember, the first time I went on Pardon My Take, before I went on and did the appearance, I was talking to friends of mine, and they kind of said, like, look, you don't realize this, but there's a whole nother audience out there that you aren't exposed to. And I said, what are you talking about? I do my thing on Twitter, and people see me on TV, and said, no, there's a whole nother region which you need to get to. And after that one appearance on Pardon My Take, everything else just changed. And you start to see that. And that is where things are headed right now. Things like Pardon My Take, things
Right.
like Stuffed, things like doing things that are, I think, shorter, easier to read.
Yeah.
That's why everything I write right now, if you read, the Breakfast Buffet every day, it's 3 big picture topics, it's 5 games to watch, and it's 5 small samples of things, and that's it. Keep it
Yep.
moving.
Keep them moving. Right. Okay. I'll let you go here soon. A couple more questions. I want to get just your overall thoughts on the 2021 season. Like, obviously it's a different type of season, but we're all just blessed to, have a season.
Yeah. No, I think, like you kind of said and pointed out, we're dealing with a once in a century global pandemic. We're dealing with, obviously, a once in a century thing. And for all intents and purposes, to think that we weren't going to have bumps in the road, to think that we weren't going to have hiccups along the way, would have been completely naive and really, I don't think, realistic. So
Right.
we're in a situation right now where we have had hiccups. We're going to have more hiccups, obviously, moving forward. But I think it's important to remember this. As of today, I believe just under 94% of the teams that opted to play college basketball this year are up and running. That's a tremendous thing.
100%. Okay, so obviously the NCAA tournament will be played in Indianapolis. I'm sure you'll be there. Obviously, kind of what are your initial thoughts on that? As we're getting closer to there, more information is coming out, but obviously, how do you feel about that?
Looking forward to it. Really excited for the NCAA tournament. Really excited to be in a situation to crown a champion. Certain programs were obviously deprived of that opportunity last year, and
Yeah.
now we're in a situation where we're moving forward, and it's going to be an NCAA tournament that is significantly more unique than anything that I think we've seen in quite some time. And like, here's another thing. I have always been, an advocate for standalone games in college basketball. I've tweeted about that. I've written that for a